So we've talked about our goals, and we've talked about how to get prepped, at least on the mental side of things, knowing that, you being professional, you being ready to rock, you being prepared will only help to starting the process off on the right foot. Let's talk about how you can be prepped technically. So we know we have our mic. We know that we're using a U87, a condenser mic. And this is not a tube mic. So tube mics are typically powered by a separate power conditioner to help bring the level up. This Neumann uses what we call phantom power, or 48 volt phantom power. So you're saying, well, what does that even mean? Without getting super technical, your microphone essentially is not loud enough to match the line gain, or essentially to be loud enough for your track, if we're really kind of dumbing it down. So you need to be able to power it, and we're using that with the 48 phantom volt. And then to bring the level up, we use what's called a preamp. Now, most audio interfaces have a built-in gain control where you can add gain to your signal. But we typically like to use specific preamps made by third parties, and we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to actually show you here on the screen. And those will color the gain in a way that it makes your sound thicker and sound more rich, which we like. So is it technically wrong to use a gain that comes with your interface? No, it's not technically wrong. But would it be better to be using something like a Neve 1073 or a Chandler or a 1081? Like, there's a bunch of really API. They will enhance your sound that much more, and that's why any legit pro will always use a legit preamp. So if we look here on the screen, the wonderful company that is Universal Audio makes a application that goes with their interfaces called Console, and we're going to be using it a ton today as we're tracking. And if you look here on our first channel here, which I have muted, they have this unison slot. So before I even put anything on it, you can see that I can add gain up here on the input, and that's fine. And that's a really nice, clean, clear gain that comes with your whatever Apollo device you're using. But you can also, as you look in here, you can pick these preamps that they've modeled. Now, these are actually modeled after actual physical hardware pieces. So if you were to go into a studio that has this hardware, if you know how to use it in here, you know how to use it out there, and vice versa. There might be some elements in a plugin that are added on after the fact, but you get what I'm saying. So the number one most commonly used preamp for vocals, bar none, is a Neve 1073. And as we see it here, what's cool about Console, and if you watch my input, as I now turn up the gain knob on this plugin, you can see it also adds it here, over here on the left. So how much gain do you add is a great question. It was a question I had when I was first starting getting all this. The answer is, well, there is no, again, here's what works for me. Somewhere between 35 and 45 is typically a good starting point for me on a normal, let's say on that U87. What happens is if you start driving this higher and higher, not only will it get louder and louder, but it'll also start to distort. And maybe that's the sound you're going for, but if you're looking for that, 9 times out of 10 clean, clear vocal, you do not want to distort the vocal, especially not at this stage. If you want to add distortion later, fine. But right now, if you're just trying to get a nice, clean, clear signal, it should be somewhere in this ballpark. And then as you also look over here, I can activate that phantom power by clicking the 48V, and you can see that right there. Now, the next thing, so now we got our mic, it's going through the preamp, we got a signal. The next thing that you would potentially add is, let's say, a low cut. or a high-pass filter, or whichever one you want to call it. And what's great about this plugin, again, is that you can do it right here. So let's say we want to knock off everything below 50 hertz. It's right there. If you choose to just say, you know what, I don't want to do that yet, I can do it later, I get it, that's fine. But for me, and what I do, and again, that's what this whole course is about, what works for me, not necessarily saying that you have to do it my way, but this is the way I do it. I will typically engage that 50 hertz cut as I'm tracking. I really won't go any higher than that. 80 is a lot, 160 is just insanity, at least in the tracking stage of things. I'd like to make sure I have that information to do with it what I may down the line. Then I'm pretty much done with the 1073 by that point, so I can close that. Next thing I'd open up is probably a compressor of some kind. There are a lot of fabulous compressors that people use for tracking. The hot one that people use a lot lately is a TubeTech CL1B, and we're going to get into that a little bit later when we get into the mixing side, the TubeTech. That's a fabulous compressor. But today, what we're going to use instead, I'm going to swap this out, is we're going to use an LA2A because that is nice and simple and you just can't go wrong with it. And they look like this. And LA2As are great because it's just two knobs, super simple. Your reduction is this knob on the right, and then any extra gain that you want to add after the fact, this is not the gain going in, but this is the gain going out, is over here on the left. And as far as peak reduction, and you'll see this again, and I'll probably talk about it one more time when we're doing our tracking, but you should be trying to get somewhere between 1 and 3 dB of reduction. Maybe it'll bounce up to like 5 or 7, but only on a real extreme peak. If you're just getting some nice overall general compression and you want to use a compressor, that's what I would do. Some people don't like to print their compression because they say, look, I'd rather do it after the fact, and I get it. But one of the great things about, again, this console application is that you, over here on the right, you can see I have the monitor in the record mode. As you can see, red and blue over here. And when it's in the record, it's going to print whatever I run that vocal through. It'll always print whatever's in the unison, but over here on these inserts, it'll print if I choose to print it. And then the last thing I would do as far as putting on these inserts is an EQ. One of my favorite EQs to put on a vocal right out of the chute is a Pultec, because they're just gentle and they're nice and they always sound amazing pretty much all the time. And I really like adding a little bit of 10K, and this is the Q bandwidth, so you can see broad at 10 and really sharp at 0. I like about a 6 or a 7 or a 6.5, and I'll add a dB 2, maybe 3 of 10K, which is just some nice air in the frequency range for that vocal, just to kind of give it a little bit of sizzle and silk for that singer to make it feel that much more special for them as they're recording. The last thing I want to talk about is reverbs. And some people like to sing. We say wet and dry, meaning that if you're singing with reverb, reverb is considered a wet sound, and if you have nothing, no effects on your mic, that's known as dry. And so if some singers like to sing completely dry, but most singers that I've worked with like at least a little bit of ambience, helps it sit in the track a little bit better. And as you can see over here on the right, the two guys that you just cannot go wrong with, and probably number one is an EMT 140 plate. That is just always solid. And we're going to talk about that reverb a little bit more in depth later in the mix side, but here, this is your first view of it if you've never seen this reverb before. Fantastic, always sounds great. And the other one I'm using today is an EMT 250, which is same company, and it's just actually a more modern version, even though it looks like a crazy R2D2. It's actually a huge unit. It's really, really big in real life. Obviously, this is an emulation of it. And it sounds amazing as well. One more thing while I'm thinking about it. If we look here and the insert effects, again, we were talking about being printed, record mode, and monitor. If you look here on the screen, you see red and blue. Those reverbs, the two EMTs that we're using here, those are actually not printed when you're recording. So even though the singer hears it, that's actually not being printed into your DAW. The 1073 and the preamp is, the LA2A and the compressor is, the Pultec and the EQ is being printed, but it's being printed dry, and we say wet and dry, meaning wet being that has the reverbs or any other effects, delay, whatever, and then dry meaning no effects. So just wanted to point that out so you didn't expect that you spend all this time getting your reverb right and then it's not printed in your mix. The reason why I typically don't do it is because I like to, again, have the choice of what kind of reverb I'm going to use. My opinion might change, later in the mix phase, and I don't want to be locked into a set reverb. I would never print effects. Printing dry is the way to go. You can always add the exact copy your settings and put it into your mix if you really loved it, and bring them back in after the fact. But printing dry is the way to go, and I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. So that is my normal, at least prep side on the technical side of things. But again, you want to make sure that you are not recording too loudly, because if you are clipping inside the DAW, that you can't undo that. So you want to make sure you have headroom for that singer, and we'll look at that today as well. And if you choose to print those effects, like I am, make sure they're really subtle. I mean, unless you really know what you're doing, I'd say always err on the less is more. I mean, you really can't go wrong, because you can always add more stuff later. But once that singer is printing this to your computer, you can't undo that. So less is more, and hope this helps. Let's move on to the next thing.